programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Hello and welcome back to the show called also The Shiny Side Out with Dave and the Mackie. So welcome back also 606, 606. Yeah, that's very true. 600, like I said, 607. Donate if you can, please. This is the second hour. We're going to talk about the hypothesis.
I was wrong. 6. It is 6.
Oh, Jesus. Good Lord. Can I get someone that can count here, please? What? That's what happens when you don't pay for the talent. Okay, I just want to say that here. No, look, donate if you can. And if you can't, tell people about the show and the station, in fact. And maybe one of those good people can donate. But without further ado, let's jump right into the show topic. Last week, we started reading you from the Epic of Atrahasis, which is one of the oldest Genesis accounts. Well, actually, the oldest Genesis account that we have come across, that is, written down, I should say, which, if you are unbiased, clearly the forerunner to what we found in the Bible and other books like that. But this ancient account is far more detailed and far more plausible than what we've been given in Sunday school as far as Genesis is concerned. Talk of womb goddesses, which, for all intents and purposes, are described like artificial wombs, or brooding machines, if you will, even, in which the newly created human race was gestated. 7 men and 7 women back in those days. Or was it 10? I remember.
It's 7 and 7.
I think it was 7 and 7. That's correct. And there's some of the text is missing, so we don't know all the detail. But the whole process was very interesting. It included the sacrifice of a god as well, whose essence, both, I guess, genetically and spiritually, and this is something we haven't really discussed before, seems to be mingled with the earth DNA, potentially of a hominid or some such, as it were. We don't know. Suffice it to say that it was the first, or it seems to be the first race, the Adamic race that was created by the Anunnaki. All of us are not of that race. So we think we are, but we're not. We are, at best, the second race.
The one that came after. Yeah, because of the flood. Yeah.
Bingo. Right, where most were destroyed, but a new crop, let's call it that.
New crop.
A new crop was harvested.
The first ones weren't mortal.
Correct.
They were immortal.
Yeah, and then they decided, that's a bad idea.
Yeah.
Let's not do that.
They're running amok.
That's pretty much what happened. Now, we've just come, in the text, we're up to 600 years after the humans were created, 600 years, or thereabouts. And they were created ostensibly to carry out the work, the labor of the gods, the Igigi, which were the brothers of the Anunnaki. Now, the exact relationship between the Anunnaki and the Igigi is open for debate, but in my mind, and Dave, you're obviously free to disagree, it seems to me that the Anunnaki were the ruling class, right? If such a thing existed in their political spectrum. The ruling class, which also seemed to be the long-term planners, strategic decision makers, overseers, etc., etc. That seemed to be the Anunnaki. I don't know if it was by merit, by intellectual capability, or simply by genealogy, meaning you inherited your post. I have no idea. Whereas the Igigi, while from the same blood, as they point out in the text a number of times, so the same race of people, as it were the physical workers, right? Not necessarily the movers and shakers, the planners, the strategists, etc., etc. Not the political class, if you will. Again, same people, different functions. Kind of like a beehive in a way. Probably not quite as restricted, because the Igigi eventually had enough and said, "I'm done digging these channels." Which will in time form the Euphrates and the Tigris, two-stream land, the Levant coming out of the mountains of Turkey.
Yep.
So I'm done. I've been digging for a long time, brother. I'm just not feeling it anymore. And they went and protested, and interestingly enough, in what might be the first labor dispute in recorded history, the Anunnaki said, "Oh, geez." I'm paraphrasing, obviously. "We seem to have missed the beat here. We heard the limitations and the hard work. We really have been driving them too hard. I mean, bad us. Look at how we treated our brothers, cousins, whatever. That's just not cricket, is it? Okay, well, how can we resolve this? Okay, I'll tell you what. We'll just make people that do the work."
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's a good idea. Let's make people. And so they did. Off they went, and the lady that did it, which leads me to believe it wasn't a thing that they did on a regular basis, but the lady that did do it, she must have been a geneticist. She was then called Mami, and everybody bowed down to her, I guess, scientific prowess, I want to say, maybe spiritual, I don't know. And and she created these humans, and she had this great status now in the Anunnaki society. So clearly this was an extraordinary thing for them to do, because if it was something they do all the time, they would have done it in the first place. There would be
that's right.
no song and dance. But they did, in fact, make a big thing out of it.
I just want to add
go on.
something to it, and the mixing of the clay and the spit and the Anunnaki person, and then the 7 womb goddesses, or the machines, right, doing all this. Yes, you make a good point. Now, if you were the servants to the Anunnaki in space on spaceships, the toil's not so bad.
Yeah.
I can only imagine the toil would not be so bad to do that. Having to dig endlessly for 600 years, that's got some bad connected to it. That's a lot of effort. So that's where I think that it sounds to me like that's the origin of the complaint of their, the noise was too much, their yelling was too much, right? And they even shed a tear when that story was told to the council. They said,
That's
"Oh my
correct.
God, really? What?
Yeah.
We're doing what? To who? Oh no, stop doing that. Let's make the people to do the bidding for us. Let's make them do the toil." So it does sound as though they weren't heartless, but imagine if they were the ancient ones, Meki, from another sci-fi. They're not capable of doing the toil, right? You make the things to do the toil.
Yeah.
So I think it does certainly make a well-structured story, and in the days when it was written, it appears as though it was narrated to the person scribing this, and so by maybe one of the last ones before they left, if that makes sense.
It's
Because
possible.
the story does talk about leaving some of the Anunnaki behind just to see things through, and then when the project concluded, they were off. So that's the way it seems overall from a top-down view, how I see it anyway. But I think is the first. Had you finished your point? Sorry, I did.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. So I think we're at now. There was one Atrahasis.
Yeah, but we need to give it context. So
Yes.
start at the 600 if you want.
Mm-hmm. Oh, okay. 600 years less than 600 passed, and the country was as noisy as a bellowing bull. The god grew restless at their racket. Elul had to listen to their noise. He addressed the great gods. The noise of mankind has become too much. I am losing sleep over their racket. Give the order that Surupu disease. Mickey, did you believe this is like frost or cold?
No, that's the translation.
Oh, right. Okay. Shall break out. I'll pass it to you.
Now there was one Atrahasis, whose ear was open to his god Enki. He would speak with his god, and his god would speak with him. Atrahasis made his voice heard and spoke to his lord. Now again, Atrahasis made his voice heard. This to me, brings back, the whole thought process around telepathy here.
Mm-hmm.
How long will the gods make us suffer? Will they make us suffer illness forever? Enki made his voice heard and spoke to his servant. Again, Enki made his voice heard. Call the elders, the senior men, start an uprising in your own house. Let the heralds proclaim, let them make a loud noise in the land. Do not revere your gods, do not pray to your goddesses, but search out the door of Namtara. Bring as baked loaf into his presence. May he be shamed by the presence, and wipe away his hand. Now, what this Enki, and Anunnaki, by the way, is doing here is he's telling Atrahasis, well, if you got a grief, then do something about it. Okay? Stop paying attention to your gods. Make a loud noise of protest. Start an uprising in your own house. Do not pray to your gods, but instead go to this Namtara person and bring a baked loaf into his presence, and so he will be shamed by the present you give him, and wipe away his hand, whatever that means, right? The elders listened to his. There's a bridge here, by the way. So the elders listened to his speech. They built a temple for Namtara in the city. Heralds proclaimed, text missing. They made a loud noise in the land. They did not revere their god. They did not pray to the goddesses, but searched out the door of Namtara. Brought a baked loaf into his presence. The flour offerings reached him, and he was shamed by the presence, and wiped away his hand. The Surupu disease left them. The gods went back to their regular offerings. So, there are two important things we've learned here. Three, in fact. One, the gods were annoyed with the racket that the human beings were making, noise and God knows what else, right? Maybe pollution, who knows? But they didn't like it, right? So they made them sick, and it seems they've given them the cold or the flu or whatever it was, some kind of disease. But the translation of Surupu is frost or cold. Further, the Anunnaki are not a united front. There's not one person that speaks for all, clearly. Mm-hmm. And in fact, the human beings, or the first Adamic race, was encouraged to create an uprising or protest movement. And also go to Namtara, right, who must be some kind of arbiter, I have to look that up, and give that Namtara person an offering of bread. And Namtara took the offering of bread, and he was ashamed by the presents they gave him. And he wiped away his hand, which means that Namtara was probably responsible for the Surupu disease hitting them in the first place. And the disease went. And the gods went back to the regular offerings, which also tells us that the gods don't like disruption either. Okay? So this is not a god-human relationship as we see it today. Far from it. These are beings, godlike in power, clearly, to the human beings of the time, that can be reasoned with, that can enter into contracts with you, that can grant you things. And again, the squeaky wheel, right? This is probably the oldest written example of the squeaky wheel I have come across. What's the squeaky wheel? The squeaky wheel gets the oil. So if you have a complaint, if you make a complaint, if you become an obstacle, if you become a hindrance, right, and it's not show-stopping, let's say, but enough to annoy people, your wheel will get oiled and the squeak will stop. So whatever you're asking for, you will get. And this is what we're seeing here. The squeaky wheel will get the oil, right? It is really a very different account to later accounts, specifically in the Bible, where God is portrayed as Almighty, still in the plural, mind you. Yahweh Elohim. Yahweh Elohim is plural of that verbiage. It's a Hebrew, a pluralization. Okay, so it's not a God, but gods or the sons of God, or what you want to call it. I don't care what you want to call it, right? This is not a single God that the Bible is referring to, even though we now think there's just a one God, right? That's a complete misunderstanding of the Abrahamic religions and the text that we've been given. And in the Anunnaki, I guess, times, when they were still here, let's say, human beings knew that. They didn't say there was no one said here there was one God. There was a whole bunch of them, and they all did different things. And we're working for them, right? And apparently we've become too loud and noisy and cumbersome for them. So this is really important to understand. Okay? That this is the oldest written accord we have of this. And the Bible and everything else are but copies of this text. Maybe not even copies of the text, but rather stories that people remembered. I mean, the Jews were in Babylonian captivity for quite some time. They would have heard these stories. They might have made them part of their own canon, right? Simplified it, because the book of Genesis doesn't talk about birth mothers, right? Or mommy.
That's right.
Or having women and men created equally.
At the same time, yeah.
Yeah. Now, they said, no. Adam first, then Eve from Adam's rib, to, at this point, establish the male dominance for, the foreseeable future. Because if, clearly Adam is the more important person. And then Eve was just an offspring of him, in a way, right? His rib, as it were. Which is not true to the original text. Men and women created at the same time equally. Mm-hmm. Very important. But wait. Go on.
I was going to say that Namtara wasn't lactose intolerant.
Nice. There's more.
I shouldn't say lactose intolerant. What's the wheat one? Celiac.
It'll come to me in a second.
Yeah, cool. But wait, there's more.
There's
a further component part of the hypothesis is that the fact gluten. That's right. They weren't gluten intolerant, right? Is the fact that some members of these high civilizations have survived to the present day. I am talking about personal immortality rather than bloodlines. But naturally, there seem to be bloodline connections as well with the same families / groups of people ostensibly appearing in charge of running civilization, and by extension us, their chattel like cattle, right?
That's it.
Being born into powers affords you 3 good points here. A different view of the world, which while appearing callous merely reflects the position of power that is held, i.e., like we're just fodder, it doesn't matter, we can be expendable. A view that small lives and small people do not matter. Strategic thinking in favour of tactical thinking to the point of centuries and millennia rather than years and decades, and certainly not the 24-hour news cycle. This would, of course, be exacerbated, thank you, if those powerful personages also happen to be immortal. Human lives would truly just seem like ants or mayflies. Meki.
So then, what is the motivation for the super rich and powerful? and must have been throughout the ages. Motivation for the super powerful and super rich. Agencies within the box that have gleaned the nature of the box and are using it to their own advantage, not the masters of the box. And the motivation would be control and status quo, self-perpetuating stability, personal immortality. Now, how would you achieve that? All ancient and modern civilizations revere gold and metals of the platinum group of elements. Ancient gold mines have been discovered that date back thousands and even tens of thousands of years. Ancient legends speak of gods that created man to specifically mine gold, and we just discussed it at length, the Anunnaki. But why? Why mine gold? Why is gold important? It's just, okay, it's shiny, it's heavy, it doesn't corrode, but, big whoopty. Now, we actually have discussed gold. We have discussed that gold itself, while having non-corrosive properties and has many applications in technology, does not really warrant the almost mystical reverence it enjoys. One cannot eat it. Hold that thought. One cannot fashion weapons from it. It is too soft. It is not good as a tool of any kind. Again, too soft. It is quite heavy, so not easily transported. Well, actually, you can eat it. Dave?
Enter orbitally rearranged monatomic elements. Stage right. Potential life extension properties through shoring up telomeres against decay. Mana. Now, if you don't know what mana is, or muff cut, that was being able to be produced and gold put into bread, for instance, to be eaten. Ambrosia, another thing. There's muff cut there. And food of the gods and chosen humans. Ancient mythologies speak of the elixir of life in connection with gold and also some specific plants. I know one of those plants, Meki.
Nice.
Yes, Astragalus.
That's the one.
Almost all ancient cultures place the gods on a mountain or a high place. They all either ingest gold or liquid white gold or a plant extract to extend their life, and they all treat individual humans with indifference at best. But they seem generally to see us as chattel, as a resource to be used and abused. ORMs, or orbitally rearranged monatomic elements, is not only important for life extension, but seems to be, in combination with mercury, a powerful fuel or explosive, which seems to have been harnessed by the Nazis and later the US and Soviet scientists in covert black ops programs. Meki, this is one of your favorites. Go through the items.
Look, we've discussed the Bell Area 51 the Red Mercury scare of the 1990s and the associated ballotechnic explosives at length. We spoke about Project Paperclip. And I think everybody knows what this is now, but in case you don't, it was a program that brought Nazi scientists to the US scot-free. Scot-free. And without it, there would be no rocket program, I can tell you that right now.
Mm-hmm.
The Russians had something similar, except they weren't so prosaic as name it something, just grab the scientists. That's it. It's no program here, you just work fast now, that's it. Off you go. Now, the Bell, in and of itself, seems to represent a branch of technology that we officially, as far as we know, have not been pursuing in the West. It seems to, it's really odd. It's sort of tied in with the Kecksburg UFO sighting and find as well. The Bell seems to have been able to tear a hole into time and space. People say that time travel, interdimensional travel with the Bell seems to have been possible. People that worked with the Bell usually didn't live very long. The radiation or other toxic emissions, again, we don't know what killed people by the scores, it seems.
Mm-hmm.
a lot of slave labor.
Anyone within a proximity of it, because it was torsion
Yeah,
physics that
correct.
made the material in the captured material spin and rotate, and it was electrified and provided produced a bunch of really high EM emissions.
In my mind, the technology, the science that was either discovered with or exploited for the bell made its way to the United States at the very least, and I think left a footprint as well in the Philadelphia experiment. I think the Philadelphia experiment is exactly the kind of thing that would have happened if you used torsion physics to do anything, really. I mean, we talk about people embedded in the fabric of the ship, having traveled in space and time, it seems, right?
Yep.
Now, of course, the US government completely denies
Dismissed
any
it,
and all veracity on the subject.
Eldridge,
But
that's right.
bingo. But it's actually that the Eldridge would be the name of the ship, by the way. Look up what it means, guys. It's really quite fascinating. But as I said, Army might have been a catalyst, and certainly within the Nazi bell programs we discussed, that made time or even interdimensional travel possible. Maybe exploiting flaws within space-time or the ability to open gateways to other dimensions or time streams with a physics that is suppressed or not fully understood and lost to most of us. And this is really important to understand as well, because this whole gate technology is not a recent phenomenon. Like this is not come out of some kind of science fiction book that all of a sudden everybody's talking about it. In modern times, it was first discussed, when we discussed both quantum physics and relativity, right? So about 120 years ago, that's when we started discussing these things, because mathematically, it seemed to be possible to create wormholes, even stable wormholes, and they could potentially be traversed and lead to other times. And certainly, it could be a shortcut in space, and potentially open other dimensions if the multi-dimensional, the many worlds theory is true. However, gateways are much older than that, or the thought or the stories of gateways. You go back thousands of years. A lot of the native peoples all around the world talk about these gateways that seem to exist. In fact, and again, my favorite place in the world, Skinwalker Ranch, the natives put a warning sign up, little, not so little, a spiral made of rocks that warns, beware, there's a gateway here, don't go here, you might be sucked in, type. Paraphrasing yet again. But there are warnings in certain places in the world. And I also believe that the gateways, in conjunction with related phenomena, are responsible for the 4/11 disappearances of many people. And I think they're both stable gateways, and I also believe they're gateways that are not anchored, but move within a certain parameter of space. Now, the Nazis were fascinated by ancient science and mythology. What did they know? What arcane knowledge did they have access to? Most leading Nazis were fascinated by the occult, as we discussed in other shows, ancient civilizations, members of secret societies, and funded many expeditions and work groups and programs. They went out into the world looking for stuff. We don't know what. And people watch Indiana Jones, especially the first one, right? And they think, what a lot of nonsense and Hollywood imagination. Well, some of it, yes, but most of it, no. Hitler had the spear of Longinus, the spear that was meant to have pierced the body of Christ, for example, right? And he lost the war when the Allies took that spear. Okay, so they were steeped in the occult. They were steeped in the unknowable, if you will. They sent people to the Himalayas, for crying out loud. They were looking for this stuff everywhere. Did they find it? Maybe. Why don't you take us through the next one, Dave?
High jump. Yeah, high jump. Okay. So I just wanted to mention something about that we skipped over, because it was 3 topics there. about the orbitally rearranged monatomic elements. So the white powdered gold was meant to be produced. Mickey, was it Mount Sinai in the temple there?
Correct.
Yep, and there's gold written in a different like a glyph, and everyone moved away all this dust. They thought was dust to try and find the gold. No, yellow hard gold was found, but the orbitally rearranged monatomic element gold was found there. And there was a farmer who also found a weird substance in his soil, and he had it. He observed a number of very strange properties with this. He made centrifuges and tried to isolate the layer of this weird stuff that he found, and no one was willing to even look at it. Some Russians did, and they said, "Oh, that's monatomic gold." And when he was playing with it, he found that it disappeared out of our reality when it was heated to a certain temperature, and it came back, and you could disturb the space where it was while it was gone, and then it wouldn't disturb the pile when it reappeared again. There was a whole bunch of crazy stuff, superconducting. They did a whole bunch of really cool things, and when you ate it, there were experiments that suggested that both hemispheres of your brain aligned, reduced in complex electro interaction, and then harmonized, and it's a cumulative experience where you get smarter. And around about that time, that movie Mickey that came out that had the fractal zooming, where the guy found the medication and started taking it, was becoming endlessly smarter. Do you remember? Oh, I forget the name of it. Anyway, I'll remember it one day. So anyway, just going to say, we learned all of that by a fellow who's no longer alive, and he was talking about the Egyptians. Worship comes from the word workship, where you work for your gods, and they were baking bread with monatomic gold in it as white powder, and it was making the gods immensely smart, and no one knew why. And here's a recipe, just do that and just keep feeding us with it, and it's all good. You can easily dominate over and the other thing was that it grows your telomeres. So there's a bunch of rumors here. We can't confirm them because we don't have access to it, but there is a way of doing it. Mickey, what was that movie where the guy takes that medication and he just gets smarter and smarter?
Limitless.
Limitless, that's right. So around the time we were discovering orbitally rearranged monatomic elements, the movie came out called Limitless, which was describing pretty much the effect of what monatomic gold would be if you were to consume it, which was pretty cool. One of the smartest guys on the planet took it and described his experience as well. Not the medication from Limitless, but rather monatomic gold. Now I'll carry on with high jump. So why was Operation High Jump undertaken by the Allies in 1947? That's a good question. Is there a surviving ancient base in Antarctica now run by surviving Nazi scientists? Another good question. Antarctica is the hardest place to travel to. That's a good point. Certain people are not allowed to travel to Antarctica. And here's a challenge for you. If you do not believe this, try to go to Antarctica, and not just on a guided tour. Try to apply just to wander wherever you want. Do that. See what happens. Is it possible that some of their scientific breakthroughs may represent recovered or found ancient technology? You could question that, because Shangri-La, Atlantis, Antarctica, Shambhala are places that they looked. You've got to think there was something special about the Germans at the time, because they had some of the best weaponry, just not enough of it. And boy, didn't they think big, making the biggest cannon, the biggest tank. Yeah, making actual jet planes, not just rocket planes. It's kind of overlooked. They made a single flying wing. It's rumoured never went anywhere, but rumoured the plane was intact, or actually found disassembled in a warehouse. And the Nazi belt, for that matter. Like, where was this? Where was all this? Was this truly, Meki? Was it a war over, what's that called? The box that fits perfectly in the sarcophagus?
Oh, the Ark of the Covenant.
Yes. Do you think that it's even possible that might have been something? I wonder. See, the gods, be they of terrestrial or outer space origin, have been around for a very, very long time. At least Meki and I think so. And I think they inhabit the Southern Ocean. Is it possible that they moved out of the ice from Antarctica to move into, underwater premises because it was getting a bit cold? So, ancient ruins are testament to our capabilities in the past, creatively as well as destructively. You can find evidence all around the world, and one of those is Meki's favourite, the temple at Baalbek. The Göbekli Tepe and all the other tepes. There's not just one. They've now found several mountains or hills around the region who are all tepes. They're all mounts in which you dig, and you'll find the same thing that you do at Göbekli Tepe. If you don't know what we're looking for, talking about, it's basically intentionally covered up town of many towns all shaped together to make one huge city. And it's all underground now, but it wasn't when it was working. And they have these really weird T pillars made of stone that have carvings on them, or glyphs if you like. They're not hieroglyphs, they're glyphs, petroglyphs. And they're carved into the stone, and they represent creatures from around the world, which is bizarre, rather than just there. The Mohenjo-Daro is another fantastic example. Meki, the pyramids. We're still trying to discover what they were truly built for, despite, Egyptians telling us that they made them. And my response to that, Meki, and I've got a friend that lives in Egypt, and I've some Egyptian friends which I upset with this all the time, and say, I'm making another one. Oh, we forgot. What did you forget? How to make them? Yeah, that. So,
I'm sorry.
But didn't you say you made them? Yeah, we did. Oh, it was heaps ago, right? Heaps ago. Don't worry about it. Yeah. Look, there they are. They're there. You can see them. So, right, okay, yeah, good for you. So, where'd you get the stone from? It was heaps away. How many a day? Meki, I heard an example of, I think, one of the largest open cut mines in the world. If you were to get semi-trailers full of dirt and to fill this one open cut mine, which is roughly the size of an inverted pyramid at Giza, on the Giza Plateau. If you had, I think it's 300 a day, so that's around the clock emptying dirt into it, there is not enough time in a human lifetime to fill it.
You'll be right.
And it's the same size and shape, just inverted, right? Because it's an open cut mine. That just go, what? You what? So you'd have to not just dig up dirt and put it in, but you've got to chisel the stone and make it so it fits that exact spot. And it's kind of entirely impossible to have done it within a human lifetime. Eve don't care how you work it. Yeah. So anyway, that's a point we make a lot, and I get a lot of kickback. How about, Meki? How about this one? You can take this one.
Sure. There's an interesting phenomenon, and this is, I guess, speaking to the destructive capability we might have had in the past, right? And this is the molten glass layers we find in the Libyan desert. They're called, in fact, Libyan desert glass, LDG, or Great Sand Sea Glass. It's an impactite found in areas in the Eastern Sahara, in the deserts of Eastern Libya and Western Egypt. Fragments of desert glass can be found over areas of tens of square kilometers. The origin of desert glass is uncertain. Meteoric origins have long been considered possible, and recent research links the glass to impact features such as zircon breakdown, vaporized quartz, and meteoric metals, and to an impact crater. Some geologists, though, associate the glass with radiative melting from meteoric large aerial bursts, making it analogous to trinitite rather, created from sand exposed to the thermal radiation of a nuclear explosion. Let me say this again. Rather than an impact, right, we're talking about an aerial burst, similar in kind to the aerial bursts that we have done ourselves over desert areas, creating the same kind of thermal radiation, which of course then creates the same kind of glass. Libyan desert glass has been dated as having formed at about 26 million years ago. Like obsidian, it was knapped and used to make tools during the Pleistocene. Now, hard to date rock, really. Not impossible, but as we discussed earlier, I'm not a big fan of saying with absolute certainty this and this is so and so old, because we just can't tell with absolute certainty. But it should give you some pause to think that at some point, and this is not the only place in the world where this is the case, by the way, but this is the most prominent one, where there's a molten layer of sand, glass, right, that stretches over very large areas indeed. Now, to be clear, ancient texts are quite clear as to what seems to have occurred. Massive global and maybe even solar system wars. I'll get to that in a second. Nuclear and other devastating weapons. I'll get to that in a second. Complete destruction, maybe several times of the high civilizations that existed. But the gods survived and started the whole cycle again. Look at the creation myths, the flood and other catastrophes myths. Cyclical history, which is a predominant view in the East. They either went to a high place, maybe the mountains, or even into outer space, as Ezekiel himself experienced, in his biblical account at least. Now, in the ancient Indian texts, there is a lot of discussion around devastating weapons, powerful weapons, which would destroy entire armies, burn them to ash, and throw trees and elephants into the air like toys, and make the hair and nails of the enemy soldiers fall out, and the enemy soldiers would try to wash it off in a river. This weapon was a single projectile. It is said that caused this devastation. In fact, I think it was Oppenheimer who quoted the Mahabharata when he said, "I've become death, destroyer of worlds," because that's exactly what you find in the ancient Indian text when the gentleman refers to this weapon. And that weapon then is promptly destroyed after the war and thrown into the ocean. Interesting. There are other indications of massive destructive potential. Sodom and Gomorrah.
Oh, I've got a segue off this one.
Perfect. Take it.
Oh, did you know, Meki, that on that CIA website,
Yes.
with the redacted documents,
Yes.
I've got a story ready to go here, and it is... so there was a file, a military unit in Serbia, it was, and I can't remember the date. I'll read this. I'll read it out. It's only like 2 paragraphs. The file contains not only many documentary photographs and drawings, but also testimonies by actual participants in the events of one of the CIA representatives referred to this case as a horrific picture of revenge on the part of extraterrestrial creatures, a picture that makes one's blood freeze. It says, according to the KGB materials, a quite low-flying spaceship in the shape of a saucer appeared above a military unit that was conducting routine training maneuvers. For unknown reasons, somebody inexplicably launched a surface-to-air missile and hit the UFO. It fell to Earth not far away, and 5 short humanoids with large heads and large black eyes emerged from it. It is stated in the testimonies by the 2 soldiers who remained alive after freeing themselves from the debris. The aliens then came close together and then merged into a single object that acquired a spherical shape. That object began to buzz and hiss and sharply, and then became brilliant white, and in a few seconds the spheres grew much bigger and exploded by flaring up with an extremely bright light, and at that very instant 23 soldiers who had watched the phenomenon turned into stone poles.
Far out.
Only 2 soldiers who stood in the shade and were less exposed to the luminous explosion survived. That comes from the CIA.
Send it to me, please. But obviously, this is exactly what is said to have happened in Sodom and Gomorrah.
That's right.
The effect of the weapon. I always thought it'd be odd. Why would you turn into a pillar of salt? So just didn't make it. But what if there was radiation? And look, we are infants when it comes to exploring the universe. We really are. But what if there was a radiation that changed your molecular structure such that you calcified completely?
Yeah, totally. Oh, look at me.
Look at you calcify, growing a tooth in your brain. That's you, buddy.
Woo!
I'm going to tell you. Brain tooth.
Ahead of the curve.
And
my lungs. That's
but
right.
of course it makes perfect sense because our tech is good, but imagine a civilization hundreds of thousands of years, millions of years, God knows what, ahead of us. And wow, to that's something else. To think of a weapon, clearly it has to be some kind of radiogenic mutagen that allows your body's cells to metamorphosize into...
Yeah, think about that, Mickey. So we in sci-fi world, we have a device that can make stuff out of thin air.
Yeah, completely.
All right. So, it doesn't... All you have to do is rearrange the carbon atoms. You just have to rearrange the atoms and you can do whatever you want.
Because we are carbon.
That's right.
And you're right. Carbon, that's diamond, that's coal, it's carbon is carbon is carbon. You take the water out, or you state the water, you change the water into a state that we haven't yet understood. We understand the water is mysterious. Hopefully everybody understands how mysterious water is, right? But you're right, man. You're right.
So it's completely possible that you could put, say you had a replicator, then all you have to do is have an amount of something in the back of it, which is cheap, right? And you can turn it into anything you want. You could turn a brick into tomato sauce.
Just think of the
a
energy.
beautifully warm steak with tomato sauce. No, that's...
But it would take enormous amount, because it was just a byproduct of whatever they were doing. This radiation.
Oh, it might have been intentional.
Possible.
Yeah, like it might be the weapon that they are being able to join together. Kind of, we've seen this kind of thing before, Mickey, haven't we, in sci-fi?
Yeah, completely.
Who are those? Who are the people that could join together and?
I can't recall what they were called, but I know what you mean. And they just, you form a weapon that way. It's an offensive thing, but it also destroys you. On occasion.
Well, who said? No, who knows what happened next, right?
Yeah.
They could have just gone back to normal and got in their ship and flown away, right?
Possibly. Or the energy they created could have opened a portal to take them wherever they needed to go, right?
Yeah, there you go. And that was a side effect, maybe. Who knows?
That's the thing. And considering that 2 survived, that's just phenomenal. I mean, clearly, you had to be in the direct exposure radius of the radiation.
Yeah.
to get it, as it were. But it throws a whole different light on ancient mythology.
Doesn't
Remember
it?
Medusa? You
Yep.
look at Medusa, you turn to stone.
And that's right.
I mean, I always try to figure in my mind, and of course the answer is advanced technology. It's always advanced. If you can't explain something, you've got two options. One,
Magic.
or advanced technology, right? that's the option.
We said
that
magic
you have.
in tandem.
Yeah, but that's absolutely correct. Now, okay, so Sodom and Gomorrah, but there are other places that were destroyed. I mean, there are forts up in the British Isles where the walls were melted. The stone walls were melted. Now, you can't do that with the technology that was available at the time. Even today, we would have trouble, unless we use a thermonuclear device, to melt stone. It just doesn't happen that easily.
Oh,
Yet-
even in the underground bases, Mickey, those deep underground military bases, they said they stumbled upon a tunnel that was all of the stone had been melted to glass.
Yeah.
It
Now,
was beautiful, they said.
again, superior tech.
Mm-hmm.
It's that simple. And again, we are a species that truly is suffering from amnesia. The Egyptians said it to Solon, who was a forefather of Plato's, when he went to visit them. He said, you've got stories of the flood as well. He was traveling to Egypt, which was quite a way in those days from Greece. Oh, you also have a flood story, like it destroyed the world. And the Egyptians go, yeah. But you guys, you Greeks, are children. You have one flood story, or one cataclysmic destruction of the world. We know of many. The Maya spoke of 3 before this one. This is the 4th world we live in. The Indians, or the Indian culture in general, is speaking of ages before this one. Right? And right now, I think
even the First Nations people in North America, Mickey,
yes,
spoke about going in living underground with the ant people.
yes, and not just one cycle of destruction,
Mm-hmm.
but many of which the flood is the latest one.
Yeah,
so
sure.
some 15, look, I think 13, 14, 15,000 years ago thereabouts, that wiped out the then, in my mind, equatorial high civilization that existed. So both equatorial and places in the mountains which weren't covered over by ice, essentially. Because just because there's an ice age doesn't mean that life stops. We got ice on the poles. We still have civilization happening. Okay?
That's right.
The water was lower then. The water, there would have been a lot more land available around the equator, to be clear, because there was a lot less seawater. It was all locked up
And
in
New
the ice
Zealandia,
shelves.
Mickey.
Yes. The Mediterranean was probably dry,
Mm-hmm.
believe it or not.
Mm-hmm.
You're quite right in mentioning that, for example, because New Zealand was much, much bigger. And in fact, many of the islands in the Pacific would have been much, much bigger.
Yeah.
Southeast Asia would have been much, much bigger. Land bridges would exist all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Which, of course, where they don't exist today is my point. For the people back then, there wasn't a land bridge. It was just what it was. It's just land, right?
That's right. That's right.
And obviously, it also means that we are looking all the wrong places when we're looking for ancient civilizations. In fact, most of the stuff we find by accident. Like the truly groundbreaking discoveries we have made, we are completely accidental. Right? Before LiDAR and all that stuff we have now, people just digging in fields, finding all kinds of things, like the Belegi Tepe, found it. Schliemann goes to Troy because he follows whatever was written down 2,000 years ago, and lo and behold, there it is. Others,
You'll never find it, they said.
Yeah, we know where to dig for old Roman and Greek stuff because we know where the Romans and Greeks were.
That's right.
But even that surprises us sometimes. You start digging in your backyard, you find a treasure trove of gold, Roman coins, right? Never mind that we just now understanding the extent of civilization in South America, in the Amazon basin, which must have been a garden at some point.
Oh, yeah, totally.
We
what about the book that was
idea.
made of gold, Mickey, that was
Yeah.
one of the priests had hoarded away,
Yes.
and after he died, it was looted from him?
Right. Oh, geez, is that the music?
Yeah,
Holy
that's
cow.
the music, all right.
That was quick.
Look, stay tuned. Coming up next is Jer Bearers show After Hours. Do join in, call in, and say hello. He's a great bloke, has a great show, and we'll catch you Tuesday and Thursday morning at 7 a.m. Eastern Time for Plato's Cave. And then again, we'll see you next week for a show. So take care, everyone.